Well, just to get a couple of things straight, the UK population has not grown by 12 million since 2020. It's increased by 2.7 million, just below 3 million. Definitely higher than all governments have promised to make it. But again, there are reasons why it's grown the way it's grown, and it is not all boats, by the way. Also, the idea that a plan for a football club or a plan for a business like Ineos's business is necessarily a good plan for a country is very debatable indeed. But let's talk about his original comments and that apology of sorts. John Barnes joins me, former Liverpool and England player, one of the best, and played in the England team in 1986 and 1990 World Cup finals. Just always worth mentioning those moments of glory, John. Why don't we?
Just to reminisce.
Yeah, we need
Make
it.
me feel young.
We need it. Me too. Listen, why do you think so many people fall into language like this when having an otherwise perfectly legitimate conversation about migration numbers in the country and employment in the country?
Well, that is why language is very important, because language is meaningful. And of course, we can't conflate colonialism with immigration. And there's a meaningful discussion they had about immigration. And while I do believe that the reason for the working class discontent in England is not immigration, because without immigration, of the sort we're seeing now, you still have homeless people, you still have people, you look at the NHS, you look at lack of housing, that has got nothing to do with immigration, but we're looking for a scapegoat, so of course we look to immigrants. That is a completely different subject, if you want to have a conversation about that, than colonialism, which is what he mentioned, which he's now apologized for. Now that language is inflammatory, because, colonialism is about exploiting and politically controlling somebody else's country after immigrants moving into a country, as the British and the French and they did hundreds of years ago, and controlling the economic and political environment of that country. That is never going to happen here through immigration. So I suppose that's why it caused a furore, because he said it is being colonized. So of course, it's a completely different situation.
I mean, it's also worth saying, isn't it, that the vast majority of immigrants to this country are invited into this country for working reasons.
Absolutely. So, of course, this is a completely different conversation about immigration. The conversation that was going to be happening until he apologized, or people talk about immigration, was the fact that England is not being colonized. And that, of course, will cause a lot of upset, because, of course, we know how bad colonization is, regardless of whether in England we like to say that, other countries that we colonized benefited from it, rather than the extraction of the natural resources. And any kind of transport that we did was to extract those resources to the coast to bring to England to benefit England. So colonialism wasn't good for any of the countries that were colonized. And that is why there was the furore about his language about colonization.
Do you think the fact that Ineos is his company, but obviously has over a 27% share, I think, in Man United. Do you think the fact that he's very adjacent to football it makes this sort of doubly ironic and difficult because so many talented footballers, I should say, come from all over the world?
Absolutely, because of course you talk about immigration. Let's stop immigration, and Manchester United would have about 3 players, as with Liverpool and most of the other clubs as well. So of course what we want to get the best of the best from other countries coming here. But what's that going to do to those countries? You're talking about the brain drain coming from India, or their doctors and nurses, but we don't want to take anybody else. So of course immigration, it's very, very emotive, and from a footballing perspective, what we would do without immigration from a footballing perspective. And all of the fans who talk about immigration, they love their foreign players.
When they score goals.
Exactly.
Yeah, they can still turn on them. I mean, there's plenty of racism still in football.
Oh, absolutely, if they don't do well for them, absolutely. So if you're talking about the Jim Ratcliffe, and because until 5 minutes ago, when first time I heard he apologized, I obviously, now this is a completely different subject. We're going to immigration. I was coming in to talk about his language, which is why language is very important.
I'm still very happy to talk about the language. I mean, not least because I'm sure over the years you've been on the receiving end of some choice and inappropriate and wrong-headed language yourself. For people who might not know your background, you were born in Kingston, Jamaica, to a Jamaican mother, Trinidadian father, immigrated to London when you were 12.
No, we didn't immigrate to London.
My
father was a colonel in the army. He was a diplomat. He went to Sandhurst with Andrew Parker Bowles.
To Sandhurst, right?
We lived in Mayfair. Okay. We lived in Highgate.
Very nice.
Of course, because I'm black, I must be an immigrant. And of course, immigrated. We didn't. And my family went back after 4 years. He got recalled back to Jamaica, and I stayed to play football.
I see.
And that is why there's so many nuances around when you see people who look like me in this country. It was a placement of your father. We've come under different circumstances.
Yeah.
But of course, once we lump everybody together as immigrants, so I wasn't an immigrant. And I was offered a football scholarship to Howard university at 16, 17. So I was going to go to American University, to Howard, to study international relations. And Watford saw me playing in a park, said, would I like to stay? And the rest is history. So even not knowing my story.
As a Scouser, I'm very glad about that.
As a Scouser, yeah. So of course, people have a perception of who we are.
Yeah.
But even in that, talking about immigration, of course, immigration was encouraged, because immigration was encouraged after the war, because of course a lot of these jobs to rebuild Britain. And a lot of the jobs, frankly, a lot of English people didn't want to do, on the buses and all stuff like that. So, of course, when all of a sudden the economy is failing or nothing goes right, we then look for a scapegoat, and the scapegoat is always the immigrant. And that's been going on from Enoch Powell's time. That's been going on for a long time. So it just changes. But, of course, we know that that's not the real problem.
And what would you say to him if you bump into him in footballing circles and you get the chance to speak to him about this? What would you say to him?
Well, he's no different to anybody else. A lot of people feel this way because of the disenfranchisement and the exploitation of the working class, of which obviously from an elite perspective, he's obviously part of that, as we all are if we're an elite person. So and as I said, I up until 5 minutes ago was thinking about the language used in terms of colonialism and how terrible it was, how terrible it is, how terrible it continues to be all over the world, as we can see, but that's a different subject. So of course, coming on 5 minutes later, where he has a legitimate claim to have a conversation and a debate about immigration, as much as I still believe that they're still being used as scapegoats, because the vast majority of immigrants, do benefit this country. So, but that's a decent conversation to be had.
A country can always have a conversation about who comes in and who
So, of course, this is a completely different conversation now. But the issue with me was the language used about colonialism.
Yeah.
And we're being colonized.
Because if you want a conversation about colonialism, let's have one. Let's have one. But it's not this.
That is why it was a ridiculous thing to say from the point of view of colonialism, because colonialism is about a group of people who go to colonize another country on behalf of the motherland, on behalf of England. So when the Americans, the original people, went to Australia, they went there to colonize that country for Britain, not for themselves. These people, immigrants, are not coming here representing Iraq, Syria, their hair, because they have been disenfranchised from their own country, so they don't have a country, so they can't colonize England on anybody's behalf to change it.
And can I ask you, John, as somebody who's seen great success in life and with huge fan base, adoration even for what you did in football, does this stuff still get in and hurt you, wound you, sting you?
Well, I mean, when you talk about what I achieved in football, I achieved that in football. And of course, football can't cure the ills of the world. No. And we believe that footballers and people like that can make a difference. We can't. Because I'll use Mo Salah as an example. If we believe that, Mo Salah is going to change the perception of Muslims from a Liverpool fan perspective, not if he was a bad player and not if he leaves Liverpool. So therefore, this whole idea that we're going to use sport as a way to change the world, we cannot do that. We have to look at it from a societal point of view. And unfortunately, a lot of people are absolving themselves of that responsibility by just look at what's going on in football and in cricket and in music. And as long as we, and it's not just a race perspective, it's also look at the gender perspective. We believe that if we get a female prime minister, things will change because we've got a female prime minister. That doesn't happen. So we're simplifying a really complex problem.
And I asked you a moment ago what you would say to him. Would you take him on a bit? Because even his apology is a bit half-hearted. It's I'm sorry that people were offended, not I'm sorry I got it wrong.
Well, maybe he doesn't understand the nature of what colonialism actually is. Because, of course, once again, you cannot conflate colonialism with immigration. So, of course, if I see him and he won't have a conversation about immigration and the benefits of it or the reality of why we're using them as scapegoats, blah, 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 fine. But there's not even a conversation to be had in terms of defending the words colonialism and using it in this context. So, I mean, if I mention, I'm respecting his own Manchester United, we'll have a conversation about football. So I suppose that's about it.
But you wouldn't raise it?
If he wanted to defend the language in terms of colonialism, then of course we'll have a discussion, and of course that is indefensible, because there's no, and I'm sure once he understands what colonialism is and what it actually does to exploit, degrade, and control politically and economically somebody else, then of course that's completely wrong. And I don't think he meant it in that way even to begin with. So I don't think he'll ever defend that.
It was clumsy more than... Yeah. Can I ask you as well before you go, the World Cup, of course, this summer in the US, we learned overnight that Donald Trump says ICE, the immigration control and enforcement, are going to be, in his words, a key part of security at the World Cup in the summer. I mean, it's going to be some World Cup, isn't it, given the atmosphere that's in America at the moment?
But I mean, the World Cup belongs to the world, and regardless of where you're from, regardless of whether you're from a country that America doesn't like, if you're in the World Cup, your fans have a right to come and see that World Cup. So therefore, that's why I say politics and sport should never mix. And I don't like that idea. And unfortunately, he's actually doing that now. That's the reality of what he's actually doing. He says things for effect. So we'll just have to watch this space.
But there's a danger, isn't there, that let's say you're, a Brazilian living in America for the time being on whatever visa that you've got, or in the process of looking for a green card or asylum. I think what he's saying is those fans should be on notice, because ICE is going to be hanging around. I mean, that's not great.
Well, the thing about that, I think the World Cup will be cut short. If 1,000 fans turn up to watch Brazil and all of a sudden they're going to be arrested and there's going to be a big furore outside there.
You think that would end things, do you?
I think that definitely would end things if that happens, and I don't think it will. I think he's just trying to play to his base, and once again deflect from the issues that they're actually having. But I think it'll go out without any issue.
Interesting. Thanks very much, John. It was good to talk to you. John Barnes, former Liverpool and England footballer who played in the England team in 1986 and 1990 World Cup finals.